is its people. The country's wealth is its people, not anybody else. Finer and truer than the purest diamonds. Okay, did you all understand this line?
Yes.
Okay, is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, right. Let's move on. He says, it is from these comrades in the struggle that I learned the meaning of courage. He says, when I saw all of them, the people who have gone before me, when I read their stories, when I saw them, in front of me, they were struggling for freedom. I learned the meaning of courage, what price we have to pay when we require the freedom of our nation. So he says, time and again, I have seen men and women risk and give their lives for an idea. I have seen men stand up to attacks and torture without breaking, showing a strength and resilience that defies the imagination. The meaning of resilience is given here, but anybody who can put it in your own words? Anybody?
Tenacity.
Pardon?
Tenacity.
Okay. And in any other simpler meaning so that everybody understands? What could be the meaning of
To be
resilience?
able to be able to work up again even when you've hit rock bottom.
Yes, and also to endure. Okay, I'm sure all of you would have heard the word endure. Endure pain, endure suffering, and come out of it victorious. Okay, that's called the quality of resilience. You should always have that when you're facing some hardship in life. So he says that defies imagination. Nobody ever could have imagined that all these people, having suffered from so many centuries, they would have come up and got this for South Africa. And he says, I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. He says it's not that we don't get scared of anything. What does courage mean? Courage means when we have to triumph over fear, we have to be victorious over fear, even if we are scared. Now, for example, if it is an exam, you are scared, for example, a subject like maths or chemistry, which not everyone is good at. If you're scared and if you don't attempt the exam, if you're absent, that doesn't mean you have, you are victorious. When does victory come? Victory comes when you overcome the fear, the triumph over it. That is what he means. He says, the brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. What powerful lines. If you have a textbook, please underline. Those of you who are reading with me in the e-text, please write this line and keep it. Very, very important line and very, very meaningful. Okay, so he says, no one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can taught they can be taught to love, for love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. He says there is a feeling of hatred and love in all of us, for that matter. We love something, we hate something, but he says the feeling of love comes more naturally to us because we are human beings. We know, we are civilized right from our birth. Our parents teach us what it is to love or what it is to laugh, everything. So he says love comes more naturally to us, to the human heart, than its opposite. Its opposite is hatred. Okay, the opposite of love is hatred. All of you know that, all of us know that. So he says naturally it's easier to bring love more than hatred. Are you all understanding the lines?
Yes.
Okay, right. So he says, even in the grimmest times in prison, when my comrades and I were pushed to our limits. What is the meaning of push to our limits? It's written here, but then I want you all to think and tell me. When somebody pushes you to your limits, what does it mean?
You can't bear more. It's like it's
Yes,
the
and
last level.
yes, and the last level of your patience is reached. You cannot endure anymore. So he says, even in those times, the grimmest times, the hardest times in prison when I was there, he says, I would see a glimmer of humanity in one of the guards, perhaps just for a second. He says, the guards who were there outside the jail, or outside the prison, who were guarding the prison so that they don't escape from the prison. He says, even in those times, I could see that glimmer of humanity, that shine of humanity or kindness or generosity in the mind, in the maybe in the eyes of the guards. But he says that was just for a second. But he says, even if for that second, they were human, even if they were from the other party or the political, their beliefs were different, they were the oppressors. Still, he says, I could see that humanity in them. And he says, man's goodness, very important line once again. Please underline if you have a textbook, or please make a note of it. He says, man's goodness is a flame that can be hidden but never extinguished. He says, basically, we all are good by nature. It is only because of some circumstances, some situations, which we are made to react in certain manner, maybe which is not good for the others. So he says, goodness or love comes naturally to human soul, to human heart, because we all are human beings. God has created us basically merciful and full of love. It's only because of the circumstances that some of us change according to it. Okay, we will skip the oral comprehension check for now. We'll do that in the next session. Okay, let's read on. He says, in life, every man has twin obligations. Twin means twice. Okay, two things. Okay, he says, obligations to his family, to his parents, to his wife and children. That is one obligation. Okay, as a man, there is one obligation, he says, to his family, his parents, his wife and children. And the other obligation is to his people, his community, his country. Like how all of us now, when our prime minister told us, I'm sure all of you would have done that, at your house. Last week or last to last week, he had told us to come out of our house and show solidarity by, clapping and by making noise, by hailing the doctors who are, curing the people with this epidemic, from this epidemic. And also last week, we all had lighted candles or diyas, whatever was available at our house. So that shows solidarity. He says, yes, we are obliged to our family. We have to keep them happy. But at the same time, we also want people to be dedicated to our community or our country. We have obligation for that as well. And he says, in a civil and humane society, each man is able to fill those obligations according to his own inclinations and abilities. But in a country like South Africa, it was almost impossible for a man of my birth and color. He specifies color, not only birth. Please make a note of that. He says color, to fulfill both of those obligations. In South Africa, a man of color who attempted to live as a human being was punished and isolated. That was the treatment which was meted out to people who used to attempted to live as a human being. You can make out from this line that they were not even considered as human beings, the blacks, only because of their color. In South Africa, a man who tried to fulfill his duty to his people was inevitably ripped from his family and his home and was forced to live a life apart, a twilight existence of secrecy and rebellion. Twilight, what does twilight mean? What can it mean in terms of literature? Does it mean a time when there is light available, or does it mean darkness? What does it mean?
A hidden existence.
Hidden existence, yes, and that
Light,
too in
light in
darkness.
the dark.
See, twilight is a time when there is not much of light. It is dark.
It's a middle ground. You're neither in the light or neither
In the
in
light,
dark.
yes, exactly. So it was a life of secrecy. So they were completely isolated from the society. That's what he means to say. And he says, I did not in the beginning choose to place my people above my family. But in attempting to serve my people, I found that I was prevented from fulfilling my obligations as a son, a brother, a father, and a husband. So he says, when I saw people suffering like this, most of my affection or my loyalty went towards my country, my people, not my family. I I started sacrificing more for my people, my country, more than my family. He says, that became my first priority. And he says, now he talks about his childhood, how he grew up, and he says this hunger to be free, that urge, or that what do you say, that craving to be free was not when he was born, because he was like every child, like how you all are, playing, studying, enjoying your life. So he says, all those times I never came to know that life would be so hard. But eventually, when he was growing up, he realized. Let's read on. He says, I was not born with a hunger to be free. I was born free. Free in every way that I could know. Free to run in the fields near my mother's hut. Free to swim in the clear stream that ran through my village. Free to roast mealies under the stars and ride the broad backs of slow-moving bulls. So as a young boy, he never felt that, he's, subservient, or he's, because he would not know, he would not have realized. He was a young boy. So he says, as long as I obeyed my father and abided by the customs of my tribe, I was not troubled by the laws of man or God. It was only when I began to learn that my boyhood freedom was an illusion. He says it was an illusion. It was something which was imaginary, which was not real. It just appears to be real, but it is not real. So he says, when I learned that my boyhood freedom was an illusion, that was when I discovered as a young man that my freedom had already been taken from me, that I began to hunger for it. At first, as a student, I wanted freedom only for myself, the transitory freedoms of being able to stay out at night, read what I pleased, and go where I chose. Later, as a young man in Johannesburg, I yearned for the basic and honorable freedoms of achieving my potential, of earning my keep, of marrying and having a family. The freedom not to be obstructed in a lawful life. He says we were not allowed to do anything freely. Every time there was a rule that was stopping us from doing something which was required. And he says that that is the time he realized that I was not free. Then he says, but then I slowly saw that not only was I not free, but my brothers and sisters were not free. Okay. Who does he refer to when he says brothers and sisters? Does he mean his own siblings? Whom does he refer to?
The
people around him.
Countrymen.
Yes, the countrymen. He says, I saw that poverty, suffering, deprivation was there all around me. He says, my countrymen, my brothers, my sisters, they were all suffering. They were not free at all. He says, that is the time I realized that we all had been curtailed freedom. He says, we were stopped from enjoying freedom. He says, I saw that it was not just my freedom that was curtailed, but the freedom of everyone who looked like I did. And how did he look?
Dark.
Dark, yes, he was black. So he says, everyone who looked like me was suffering this. Okay, they were curtailed freedom, they were not allowed to do anything freely, etc. And he says, that is when I joined the African National Congress, and that is when the hunger for my own freedom became the greater hunger for the freedom of my people. So he says, that's the time I realized that my people were hungry for freedom. And then he says, it was this desire for the freedom of my people to live their lives with dignity and self-respect that animated my life. And he says, that transformed a frightened young man into a bold one, that drove a law-abiding attorney to become a criminal, that turned a family-loving husband into a man without a home, that forced a life-loving man to live like a monk. How do monks live? Any idea? Have you all read anywhere? How do the monks live?
They stay away from their families.
Yes.
They're very
exactly.
celibate, you can say.
Yes, correct. So they stay away from the family. They live a life of penance. They live a life of peace. They live a
They
holy
give up
life.
luxury.
Pardon, I didn't get
They
you.
give up luxuries of life.
Yes, they give up luxury. They don't, they are not bothered about any material, gains in life. So he says, I was living a life like that. I was no longer a family man. I had, come out of that boundary. And he says, I was completely like a man living for the country. And he says, I am no more virtuous or self sacrificing than the next man, but I found that I could not even enjoy the poor and limited freedoms I was allowed when I knew my people were not free. Freedom is indivisible. The chains on any one of my people were the chains on all of them. He says, even if one person was in chains or one person's freedom was curtailed or stopped, he was not allowed to, enjoy freedom. He says, if one person was like that, I felt that everybody was in chain, everyone's freedom, everyone's liberty was under check. So he says, very important line. He says, the chains on any one of my people were the chains on all of them. The chains on all of my people were the chains on me. That's how, he was. He was such a person who lived for the country, who lived for the people. Then he says, I knew that the oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. A man who takes away another man's freedom is a prisoner of hatred. Can anyone explain this line to me? I'll read it again. A man who takes away another man's freedom is a prisoner of hatred. How can that be? Amog, try.
Okay, I'll try.
Yeah.
Ma'am, yeah, so no,
Yeah.
yeah, so he's saying that he's a prisoner of hatred. So he's not actually doing it out of something. So someone might have brainwashed him, or there's some hate
Yes.
within him. So if we end
Yes.
that hatred to amongst the people, then
Correct.
maybe you can liberate him. So he'll become a changed man. So he'll become a good person, maybe.
Yes. And
So
he
he's saying
says,
there's some good hidden among everyone.
exactly. And he says, see, the line is very, very powerful. He says, I knew that the oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. He says, the people who are oppressing, the ones who were, suppressing the others, they also must be liberated. He says, a man who takes away another man's freedom is a prisoner of hatred. Somebody who takes away your freedom, or somebody who takes away, who doesn't allow you to do anything, he says, in the political context, he says that person is a prisoner of hatred. It is hatred that, encourages him to do so. Maybe he's very good at heart, but then there is some political agenda, there is some political, pressure which he's facing, and that's why they behave in that way. So he says, I don't believe that the oppressor is bad. He says the oppressor also has to be liberated. The oppressor also has to get freedom. Right? Okay. Then he says, he is locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow mindedness. What is prejudice? It's a very, very strong word. What is prejudice? Anyone?
Ma'am, it's like kind of injustice against a group or something.
No, if I say, okay, your decision is prejudiced or your viewpoint is prejudiced, what do I mean?
Your decision is biased towards one, not equal.
Okay, decision is biased. Yes, yes. Anyone else who can try?
It's just that they were, as Nelson Mandela first said, that everyone was born free of any hatred and prejudice.
Yes,
But they became their prisoners, as the selective selection of wording is there in the book. They became
yes,
prisoners of this as they were growing up. He just wants to
yes.
free them as they were at the time of their birth.
Correct, correct. Okay, partially right. See, now I'll give you a very simple example. For example, you have a friend in your class, okay, and you have another friend who tells you that that particular friend whom we are talking about, he is so and so, or he behaves like this. So when you yourself approach that person whom you both were talking about, you have a prejudiced opinion. You already have an opinion in your mind that, okay, this person is like that, so let's deal with him in that way. Okay, so that's called prejudice. Your viewpoint or your point of view or your opinion is as she said, it is biased, and it is uh, driven by somebody else. Somebody else has told you that, okay, this person is like this, so please, beware, you cannot believe him, or she behaves like this. I'm sure this happens in your class as well. It happens between friends, amongst friends. So so this is how your opinion becomes prejudiced. I'm giving you an example so that you can relate to it. It's easier to relate than I tell you about politics and sports or something like that. So I'm telling you an example from your daily life. So that's what is called prejudice. So somebody who has your mind is controlled by somebody else. Your opinion is biased, as she said, very rightly said. And he says that they are behind the bars of prejudice and narrow-mindedness. They are very narrow-minded. They can't accept that some other people are also living in that God-given land. According to them, that was God-given land, as you have seen in the explanation yesterday in the video. So he says, I am not truly free if I am taking away someone else's freedom. Okay, when I am free, I want the others also to be free. If I am taking away their freedom, then I am also not free as well. I am the prisoner of hatred. That's what he says in the previous line as well. So he says, I am not truly free if I am taking away someone else's freedom. Okay, that is, if I am free and I want to keep somebody else in prison, that's not freedom. That's not liberty. That person also should enjoy freedom. And he says, just as surely as I am not free when my freedom is taken from me. So he says, the same applies to me also. If there is somebody else who's free and he keeps me a prisoner, he is also not free because he's kept me in prison. So freedom can be enjoyed only when everybody is free. Everybody enjoys freedom. Okay. And he says, the oppressed and the oppressor alike are robbed of their humanity. The oppressor, obviously, because he is oppressing the others, he is keeping the others under check. He's ill-treating the others. There is a lot of cruelty which is meted out to them. So he says the oppressed, and obviously the oppressor is the person who's oppressed, like how they were in the times of apartheid or apartheid. So he says the oppressed and the oppressor alike are robbed of their humanity, the basic human feeling which we have in our heart, the basic quality that we have, because we all are human beings. God has created all of us equal, though we are different in our the color of our skin, the gender, the caste, the creed, the custom, etc. But in front of God, we all are the children of God. We all are equal before law, before God. So he says the oppressed and the oppressor alike are robbed of their humanity. Nobody, he says, nobody who is oppressing can be free. Okay, I hope the text is clear to you. Did you all understand?
Yes.
Yes, is it
Yes,
clear?
ma'am.
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Sure. Okay, right. So
Yes, ma'am.
yes, so I just want you all to just take a look at this video before we wrap up for the day, before we finish the session. Just give me some moment, 1 minute. Okay, I'll just share the screen, and I want you to have a look at this video. Just a second, some technical problem. Okay, just give me a moment. I'll share the screen for you. It's a very, very informative video which shows you the swearing in ceremony of Nelson Mandela.
It's taken a long time,
Can you all hear
decades
the
of suffering
audio?
and sacrifice. But today,
Yes,
at the
ma'am.
seat of government
Okay,
so
please
long,
listen
the
to it very
bastion of white
carefully.
rule, the new South
It
Africa was
comprises of
finally
how the
born,
swearing in
and the
ceremony
world
happened
came to
in those
celebrate.
times.
Leaders from 90 countries, representatives from more than 50 others, royalty from Britain, the first time in 50 years. Also, the Foreign Secretary Douglas
The
Hurd.
video is not clear
Vice
because
President
it
Al
dates
Gore
back to
came with President
1996. I
Clinton's
found
wife,
it from
Hillary.
a YouTube link.
Also, the United Nations chief Boutros Ghali to witness a rare success on the world stage. Never on the African continent has there been such a gathering of international leaders for the inauguration of a president. But then, this is no ordinary president, no ordinary man. Mr.
I
Mandela
hope you
arrived
can hear it
accompanied by
clearly.
his eldest daughter. But before he took the oath of office,
Can you hear
George
it?
W.
Hear
de
it
Klerk,
or not?
the former
So
president,
help
who
my
began the move to black
die
rule,
Drie-enige
was
God,
sworn in as a
Vader,
deputy.
Seun en Heilige Gees.
Then Nelson Mandela uttered the words that will change South Africa forever.
I,
Please listen to his speech carefully.
Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, do hereby swear to be faithful to the Republic of South Africa. So help me God.
That's the national anthem's being sung.
Never,
Please listen to this line.
never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another.
And from the skies above, a colourful salute on a momentous day for South Africa. Mark Austin, ITN, Pretoria.
You can see the crowd, how many of them had assembled there.
Ma'am, video stopped.
Yes, that's over. Only that much. I just wanted you to, just, go through that so that, you understand how the ceremony was.
Ma'am, your
And
voice is not clear.
now, can you hear me?
Your voice is not clear.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay. So I just wanted you all to know how the ceremony was.
No,
It's from
your voice is
actually.
not heard.
Hello, can you hear me now?
No.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. So just wanted you to have a glimpse of, the video of those times.
Can I
It
get my video?
dates back to 1996 actually. The video is, it's the ceremony in 1994, which was published in 1996. So that's why you could see the video was very hazy. But then I wanted you all to have the feel of, how the people were in those times. Okay. So I hope you have understood